Hello, ladies, and a few good men. Let's give a rah-rah to the men in the room. Woo! Guys, if you're single, the odds are pretty good. I'd stick around after the luncheon. My name is Rashini Rajkumar. I'm very honored to introduce the event today and welcome you all to this fabulous third annual study, the report of this amazing study that two amazing brands come together and pull off for all of us. And it is a pulling off, and you'll hear more of those details shortly. I am very honored to be connected to Twin Cities Business Magazine as the personal brand columnist. I'm also, as it just happens to be, connected to St. Catherine University. That was not planned, and they came together and they do this really cool study and many events together. This morning, I was thinking of all of you, even before the event, as I was teaching my students at St. Catherine. They are undergrads in a class called Speaking to Lead and Influence. And today was the first day of the Worldview speech. And the Worldview speech is when each of these young women needs to choose a public figure. One of my students who gave her speech today chose Sister Andrea, the president of St. Catherine, as her worldview subject. Another chose Ken Powell, the CEO of General Mills. It was really interesting as I watched them give their speeches, listen to them, and what they share about these people, these public figures, and in some cases, these luminaries, and how they deliver. I mean, they're being graded on the delivery, too, and not just the content. And as I was watching them, I was really kind of giddy. They didn't know it, but I was giddy because I thought, I get to spend the lunchtime with men and women who really care about these 17 young women in the room. You all are doing what you do now so that they are going to graduate into a much better world than many of us graduated into when we left college. So let's give yourselves a hand for that. That's pretty amazing. And the future is bright. We're going to hear the raw numbers, and some are better than others, and the great brands out there that are really trying to do it right. And your moderator today is Dale Kirshner. He is the editor-in-chief of Twin Cities Business Magazine, your host today, and I am very honored to call him my regular business contributor on my radio show, as well as a friend and mentor. He is, as well as my editor, he is an amazing guy. He's a father, a husband, and an amazing boss to his team. And probably foremost is he is an advocate of smart business in our region as well as the entire country. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Dale Kirshner.
Hello, everyone. As you know, I'm Dale Kirshner, editor-in-chief of Twin Cities Business, and I just wanted to say on behalf of Vance Opperman, who owns our parent company, MSP Communications, and also all my colleagues at Twin Cities Business, I just want to thank you for joining us today for this annual conversation that we have about the challenges and solutions for corporations and individuals who really want to ensure greater gender equality here in Minnesota and also elsewhere in the country. Do please continue to keep eating lunch, and as you listen to the first portion of today's event, you'll see that there are cards on your table to be able to write down questions. And as we roll along about midway through, we're going to open it up to Q&A. And at that time, you can either send your cards up to the podium, or you can hold on to them, and we'll have microphones available so you can actually ask your questions directly if you'd like to at that time. We also have out front, as you leave on that side of the tables, there are some sign-up sheets with descriptions of dialogue topics that we'd like to keep going between our annual events. There's also one that says Other. So if you don't see a topic there that you'd like to join and you have one that you think we should pursue, please write that down on the back of your business card. So if there's an idea that you do think you'd like to carry on a conversation with others about throughout the year, just jot down the number that corresponds to that idea on the back of your business card and leave it in a basket out there. And then we'll follow up with you shortly thereafter to get that dialogue going. The cool thing is then we want to come back a year from now and see where those dialogues take people. So for about 30 years now, I've had the honor to study business here in Minnesota and also in Wisconsin. And I've done that by writing about and assigning and editing business stories also running my own company, and then also working within major corporations. And it's been interesting to see how women have ascended the corporate ranks through the years. And during the late 80s and throughout the 90s, there was great progress. And then when I left journalism for about 7 years and came back to it, I started looking for statistics on how things were going, and it seemed like things actually regressed. And I thought, that can't be. And so I reached out to people in the community and said, where is there some good information on this? And I was really pleased to find out that St. Catherine University was indeed putting together some great research on this. And you know, they've been doing it with the help of the Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable, who has been funding their research. And we got together, talked about how could we team up, and we've been pleased to be able to include the census report that they do inside Twin Cities Business the last 3 years, and also be part of this event. As everything we do at Twin Cities Business, we don't want to just talk about a problem. We really want to kind of roll up our sleeves and dig into why is there an issue, and also where are the solutions? Who's actually coming up with solutions and moving the needle on this? And that's what we try to do with the coverage that you see in the magazine at your table, and also what we'll be doing today with our panel discussion. I think that before we begin, I need to say a few additional words about our partner and also about our sponsors as well. So as I mentioned, our partner is St. Catherine University, which prides itself in preparing its students to lead and influence, and in so doing, make a difference in their professions, their communities, and the world. St. Kate's is the largest, most innovative college for women in the nation, offering a range of graduate and associate programs for women and men. Our presenting sponsor today is Frederickson and Byron, which has built a reputation as a firm where law and business meet. And they do that by bringing business acumen and entrepreneurial spirit together as they work with their clients, not only operating as business advisors and strategic partners, but of course, great counselors. With more than 275 attorneys practicing in more than 35 practice areas, Frederickson serves a broad variety of businesses, business relationships, associations, municipalities, nonprofits, and individuals. Our second presenting sponsor today is United Health Group, a diversified health and well-being company dedicated to helping people live healthier lives and making healthcare work better. With headquarters in Minnetonka and growing rapidly in Minnetonka, United Health Group offers a broad spectrum of products and services through two business units, United Healthcare and Optum. They serve about 80 million people in the United States, and I think their numbers are over 100 million internationally. Our third presenting sponsor is U.S. Trust. For wealthy individuals and families with complex wealth management needs, U.S. Trust offers innovative and customized financial solutions to help meet unique lifestyle, family, business, and philanthropic goals. A coordinated team backed by more than 200 years of experience and the resources of one of the world's largest financial institutions works with each client to understand and address their needs to deliver services ranging from wealth structuring to investment management, customized credit and banking, and also legacy and philanthropy planning. Our first event sponsor is MDA Leadership Consulting. MDA partners with organizations to improve their performance by strengthening their leadership throughout the organization. MDA begins by first learning about a client's challenges, culture, and goals, to then define the requirements for success at each leadership level. They also then move on to identify the right leaders for hiring and advancement and accelerate leaders' development by enabling them to meet current and emerging challenges. MDA leadership believes in the simple but also true saying that better leaders create better results. Our second event sponsor is Northwestern Mutual Wealth Management Advisor Melissa Held. Melissa has dedicated herself to making a positive and professional impact in the lives of her clients. With Northwestern's 155-year history and their wide range of products and services, Melissa offers a holistic approach to providing financial security solutions to her clients. She especially enjoys working with all sorts of people, but in particular, finds energy in working with female executives and business owners. Our third and final event sponsor is Bremer Financial Corporation, a privately held $8.7 billion regional financial services company owned by its employees and the Otto Bremer Foundation. Founded in 1943 by Otto Bremer, the company is headquartered in St. Paul and provides comprehensive banking, investment, trust, and insurance services throughout its locations in Minnesota, North Dakota, and Wisconsin. So thank you for listening, and please join me in thanking those sponsors and our partner. At this time, I'd like to ask Lyndall King to come up and say a few words. Lyndall is Director and Chief Curator of the Weizmann Art Museum. She has served on the boards of several national and international art museum organizations, as well as the boards of several regional colleges and arts and architecture organizations. Lyndall is the president of the Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable, as I mentioned, a sponsor of today's luncheon, and co-producer of the annual Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership. Please join me in welcoming Lyndall King.
The Women's Economic Roundtable was founded in 1979. It's a forum for high-profile women leaders to gather insights on broad economic issues, to examine their implications, and to take action in our individual communities and lives. The membership of the Women's Economic Roundtable is invitational, with a maximum of 130 active women leaders with diverse career experiences and personal characteristics. Membership includes women from large and small business, government, the professions, and the not-for-profit sector. Our monthly meetings offer an opportunity for members to hear from thought leaders and to gain insights for us as leaders in the region nationally and internationally. Dialogue and interaction at meetings and social events forge professional and personal relationships with other women leaders in Minnesota. We are pleased to be able to work with St. Catherine University to support research on women leaders in the workplace, a subject of importance to women and men in Minnesota and nationally. I hope you will enjoy hearing this discussion of the 2013 Census of Women in Corporate Leadership as much as the Women's Economic Roundtable is proud to support this research. Thank you.
I'm Joanne Bangs, and along with Rebecca Hawthorne, we've been doing the Minnesota Census of Women in Corporate Leadership for the last 6 years. Before I get started in telling you a little bit about what has happened this past year and over the past 6 years, I do want to take a moment to thank the sponsors of the report, and that's C.H. Robinson and the YWCA of Minneapolis. I want to thank them for their support in helping make this possible. So as I talk to you a little bit about the report, there you go. We've spent, again, as I said, 6 years doing this, and I often find myself in the position of trying to find, what can I say that sounds like good news? And it's often been somewhat difficult to do that. But this year is actually different. It's not difficult to find some good news. I want to start by talking about just one company for just a brief moment. For the first time, we actually have a company that had a net increase in both women on their board and women in their executive offices, and that company is C.H. Robinson. So it's good to see that progress. And now I want to dive into looking across the whole spectrum and what's been happening over the past 6 years. So I want to start with looking at the women on boards. So we always look at all of those top 100 companies. How many board seats are there? How many are filled by women? So if you can see those numbers at all, you can see that for the first several years, we were pretty much stalled at seeing about 14.2% of those seats held by women. The last year, we went up to 14.5%, which seemed a bit promising. And now this year, we've gone to 14.9%. Now, on the face of that, that might not seem like very good news, but it does actually make quite a bit of difference. If we kind of turn around how we think about this, think about what that means in terms of progress and a rate of change. So the first part to think about that is, well, where do we want to go? So the research shows that 30% is a very important number. That's where you get to a tipping point, a point where you start to see some cultural change happening because of the number of women involved. So we'd like to aim towards that 30%. So the exercise I went through was to think about, given the rate of change that we've seen, how long will it take to get to 30% women on boards? Okay, so I looked at where we were at and how it's changed for the past couple of years. Are you ready? Okay. So when we weren't making any progress, we weren't going to get there, right? But we have been making progress. We have been seeing a change. So if I start looking at what happened 2 years ago and now this past year, we actually can see a point where that might happen if we were able to maintain that same rate of change. So we're now looking at, if we could just stay with the rate of change we had over this past year, seeing 30% women on boards in 2038, which is not great, but still makes a difference. Again, it's a lot better than the end of time. And 2038 happens to be a year when my daughter will be 35. So I have great hopes that the workforce that she's a part of will be significantly different than what I'm seeing now. And if you'll forgive me a little personal aside about my daughter, her Halloween costume this past year, she decided to be a CEO. So I have very high hopes for her, right? You know, we also take a look at what's going on in executive officers. So what we look at are those positions that the public companies are reporting to the SEC as being their executive officers. We've always seen better numbers in executive officers than we've seen for the boards, although we have had some ups and downs, some years where it didn't change, some years where it declined. But we actually have seen quite a bit of a difference this past year, going from 17.4% to 18.6%. Okay, that's very encouraging to me. We're making a lot more progress in that area, and that also leads to hopefully more progress in boards later on, as that group of people is a potential pipeline for those board positions. So doing that idea, thinking about how long will it take if we could just maintain that same rate of change that we saw over this past year, when would we get to, again, that important number of 30% of those spots going to women? It looks a lot better. Well, maybe it does. There we go. 2020. That's not so far away. Okay, so we could actually see that change in 2020. Now, that does mean that we're maintaining the progress that we've seen in this past year, and it certainly does take a significant amount of effort to make that change. Effort in a lot of different ways. There's the effort that the women themselves make, so if you think about Sheryl Sandberg and the Lean In idea, but also the effort that companies make, and that's what Rebecca and I spend a lot of our focus on. What's happening in the companies? What happens there that makes a significant difference? So every year when we've been doing the study, we've always wanted to identify those companies that are doing things differently. Okay, so I want to spend some time recognizing our honor roll. So we look at companies, first of all, that have reached 20% women on boards and 20% of their executive officers being women. And then we look a little higher, the ones we call our special distinction companies, the ones that have reached that 30%, that tipping point of women on boards and women in executive offices. Okay, so we have 14 companies on our honor roll, and 4 of those are special distinction companies. I'm going to ask the representatives from the companies to come up as I'm calling their names, calling the company names, and receive a certificate from Rebecca. Okay. So our first honor roll company is Analyst International Corporation. Thank you. Next is Best Buy Company. And then Capella Education Company. Then one of our special distinction companies, Christopher and Banks Corporation. Okay, another of our special distinction companies, Cyber Optics Corporation. Deluxe Corporation. Hickory Tech Corporation, doing business as Inventus. HMN Financial. Another special distinction company, MTS Systems Corporation. Another special distinction company, Select Comfort Corporation. St. Jude Medical. Target Corporation. The Valspar Corporation. And Excel Energy Incorporated. Let's thank all of these companies for the wonderful work they're doing.
I need to ask our panelists to come on up and join me at this point. As they do, I'm going to first tell you about Jean Crane, who will be our first panelist to tell you a little bit about herself today. Jean is the Group President and Chief Executive Officer of Bremer Bank Twin Cities Charter. In her current role, Jean oversees Bremer's investment management and trust, investment services, and insurance. She is also responsible for the Twin Cities Charter, which has $2.7 billion in assets, 27 locations, and more than 300 employees. Jean joined Bremer in May of 2012 and has more than 30 years of community banking experience. Jean?
Thank you, Dale. I really am so appreciative to be with all of you today, and I really want to thank Twin Cities Business and St. Kate's University and all the sponsors for offering the opportunity for this type of dialogue. It's an interesting opportunity to really reflect on where I've been throughout the course of my career. And as Dale just announced, I have these functional titles as CEO and President for Bremer Bank here in the Twin Cities. And as a group president, I oversee our insurance, investment, and trust businesses. But what that really means and how I spend my time is having an opportunity to work with a group of people within Bremer to help design strategy that will grow and transform our business into being a top performer. And that's our goal. And so that's where I need to spend my time. And I've only found ever that the means for a very successful business strategy discussion and design is to get to know all the constituents involved. So I spend my time with our clients and with my team. And I really think it's a twofold process, that the only way that we can put a design in place that achieves our goals and the goals of those we serve is to understand their needs. And so between spending time with clients and with my team in order to understand what they need to be successful, to be able to meet the needs of our clients, is really, I think, what my job is all about. So I have an opportunity to be very focused in the marketplace and with the team in having a lot of conversation. And it's really about, I would say, a lot of curiosity and interest in understanding the needs. So it's a lot of conversation, it's a lot of listening, it's a lot of looking at it from a perspective of the people that I am working with. And having an understanding that way, I think, leads to successful design of the business as we try to continue our growth. So in essence, that's really what my job, I think, is all about in many, many ways. We are a relationship business. We will always be a relationship business, so I spend real time trying to make connections with people to understand the needs, again, both of the team and of our client base. I was asked to comment a little bit about the challenges that I've faced throughout the course of my career. I've been in the banking industry for 32 years, and I've had frankly, the opportunity to go through 5 acquisitions. It's the nature of the beast a little bit. I would tell you, so as I talk about or think about a more significant challenge, for me it's been one of just very significant change. But like anything, any experiences you go through, I think, really shape us, really form us, and it's how you approach those changes. And so I looked at those events as a time for me to be reflective on my career, to understand if the fit remained, both organizationally and with my skill set. And I took some time to think about that, but I always kind of rose above the circumstance. It was never about looking at the circumstance that caused it. It was really understanding how the impact was to me and the energy that I get out of what I do. And so while I made some changes, it was driven more by the desire in terms of my interest in learning and developing as a leader, more so than the event itself. Those events certainly caused change, but it was always an opportunity for me to look at another step, another opportunity in the career. And then the last piece that Dale asked us all to comment on was really how our organizations have worked to achieve opportunities for women in leadership roles. When I joined Bremer in May of 2012, I was the first female CEO. We're an interesting structured organization. We have 9 separate bank charters. And at the time that I joined, Bremer had never had a female charter for one of their banks. So I was the first, and now here it is, a year and a half, almost 2 years later, and we have 3. So we have 3 of 9. So I'm really proud of the fact that we've been able to look internally at our group of talent and find opportunities when needed. In addition, we have many women in leadership roles. I look at our corporate executive leadership team. So these are the folks that work for our CEO of the holding company, and that's a team of 9 people. It's an interesting statistic. We have 7 of 9 people that are women on that leadership team. So a very significant percentage that way. And as I look at that, I really look at that these were the right people for the right jobs at the right time, and we had that talent to choose from. I think you have to be somewhat intentional about looking at the opportunity of that talent, but it's really, again, having the right people in the right place and right position for that. We have at least 50% of our branch managers throughout Bremer that are women. We have a number of women in other managerial leadership roles, including our head of retail banking for the entire Twin Cities charter, our head of treasury management, our head of private banking, our head of mortgage. We just have had a great ability to capitalize on the female talent that we have. I'll put an exclamation point to end this, and that is that most recently we had the great opportunity, we're thrilled to have Mary Brainerd, CEO of Health Partners, join our corporate board, and that's an exciting development for us, and Mary joins as the second female out of a board of 8 individuals. So with that, that's a good recap of kind of Bremer and where I'm at.
Our next panelist is Karen Himley. Karen joined DHR International as Executive VP in the Minneapolis office in January of this year, where her practice areas include board and CEO, education, and nonprofit. Previously, she served in executive positions at the St. Paul Companies, Children's Hospitals and Clinics, and the University of Minnesota. Karen is a member of several boards, including that of HMN Financial, where she serves as chair of the board's compensation committee. She was also elected the first female president of the Minneapolis Club, and currently is an adjunct professor of law at the University of St. Thomas School of Law. Karen?
Thanks, Dale. Good afternoon. Oh, come on, better. Postprandial lethargy. We're going to be here for a while, and I'm looking at some of you, and I can call on you by name, so be careful. It's a skill that you learn when you're a faculty member, so I know how to do this. First, I want to thank Dale, all of the sponsors, and all of you for being here. This is an ongoing conversation. It's one that all of us on the panel have been involved with throughout our careers, and so too with all of you, whether you're a man or whether you're a woman. This is very much continuing to be the topic du jour, and I think it will always continue to be that. I first want to shout out to HMN Financial. We're represented here as an honor roll company. I am very proud that we have been an honor roll company consistently. I've been on that board since 2005. But I wasn't the first female board member of that bank. I was the 3rd female board member for that bank, which is headquartered in Rochester. So there was total familiarity with having somebody show up for board meetings in skirts, and I didn't think anything of it. I've only been a headhunter for 3 months. But you see, at the age of 58, I've had a few other experiences in my life, and I like to think about this as the opportunity to take that accumulated experience and do something else with it, born out of the perspective of a few good things and a few hard knocks, and how I can bring to bear in the opportunity to bring more women to the board, to the C-suite, to the executive levels of organizations across the country and maybe around the world in a different way. How many of you have read Lean In? I will not ask you how many of you agree with everything that Sheryl Sandberg said or not, but she has a few good points and a few that I would say we can take offline. But one of those that really captured me was her commentary on careers being jungle gyms and not necessarily ladders. Because as I reflected on my own career in preparation for this time together, I really realized that a long time ago I started scaling a jungle gym. In fact, I've scaled a couple in very different paths. And in between each jungle gym I encountered along the way, and I fell off of a couple too, I really took advantage of what I call the in-between time. Jean talked a little bit about this, and I think it's something that has been very important and will continue to be important for women and men as they approach their careers, because times have changed. When I started in my career, a lot of my colleagues at the St. Paul companies, some of whom I see here, had been there for 40 years, 45 years, 50 years. They still gave loyalty awards out for service. And I also had a seat at the table of watching that change. And that day, I don't believe, will ever return. And during those in-between times, changing jungle gyms, a couple of things happened. You had moments of discovery. And in those periods, I realized I discovered that what motivated me was mission. And mission is not simply the purview of the nonprofit sector. There are great corporations, the St. Paul Companies was one of them, that truly had a mission orientation and also honored the expectations of its stockholders. The other thing that came about in the middle of those pauses between jungle gyms was awareness. And one of those elements of awareness was what I realized that for me, the essential spice in whatever I did in my career was trust. That wherever I was, whatever I did, the proposition of my business relationship, Jean talked about relationships, was going to be about trust. And that's essential. And then also, there was a point of recognition. You know, you fall off a jungle gym and you scratch your legs and put on the bandage and you look at the next jungle gym and you say, now what did I learn from that? And what I recognized was that for me, relationships and advocacy had to be a part of whatever it was that I did. And that awareness, that recognition, and that discovery continues to this very day as the source of what I continue to believe is my increasingly discerning consumer approach to opportunities for engagement, whether on board service, in the for-profit sector, in the nonprofit sector, or in the professional life. But when you're bouncing around between jungle gyms in a career, there are both rewards and risks, and I think these are particularly important as we talk about leadership opportunities for women. When you go down your career path or up your career jungle gym, you learn to be very clear about what your terms of engagement are. And a few nodding heads in the room, everybody knows that it's easier sometimes to express those terms than others. Women are notoriously bad at negotiating for salary. We've all read about that. But what about other terms of engagement? What about flexible work hours? And we'll come back to that. I made a decision back in 2002 to leave the St. Paul Companies. I'd been there 17 plus years. I had a great career, a great boss who happened to be retiring. And I just knew that the culture had changed enough through acquisitions and mergers that I really thought, what's done is done. It was good when it was done. And if I hang around too long, I'm going to have to take apart what I thought was good. So I said goodbye to the St. Paul Companies and thanked them for their career. A reporter from the Wall Street Journal found out about that. In September of 2002, the late Jeff Zaslow, who wrote great books, if you haven't read them, I really recommend it, sad loss to all of us, found out about Karen Himley leaving the St. Paul companies and wrote this. Last February, Karen Himley quit her job as a senior vice president of St. Paul companies. She's now meeting her daughters, 12 and 8, at the bus. Quote, I learn more about their lives during the 20-minute download when they get home than I ever gleaned at 6:30 when I'd get home from a full day at the office, end quote. When headhunters call Miss Himley, ironic, isn't it? She tells them that any new assignment must allow her to meet the school bus at 3:50 p.m. The response? Dead silence. I'm a different kind of a headhunter, and oh, by the way, another headhunter did call a couple of years ago, and I found that job, which was very rewarding. Be clear with your terms, but understand there's a downside. You will be criticized for your choices, because after that got posted, there was a raging debate about how I had left all of the rest of you in this room in the wake of a bad decision and how no woman was ever going to be hired again anywhere. Second, be comfortable in who you are. In my very first performance review in the corporate sector, having been in state government, I was told by my boss, Karen, you're just too nice. You gotta toughen up. I never really did have a Wolf of Wall Street kind of an attitude, and I think that served me well, but you know what? Just a few weeks ago, somebody said, honest to goodness, at a business meeting, Karen, you're so nice. Are you economically motivated? Think about that. So I was criticized for my style, and I'm not going to give up on nice. And then finally, solve problems wherever you go, whether they're big or whether they're small. Solve problems wherever you go. How many of you were Girl Scouts or Campfire Girls or Boy Scouts? Rule number 1 of campsite management, leave it cleaner than when you found it. But the downside risk, particularly for women, is this, that sometimes you'll be criticized for demonstrating courage. But don't ever leave the campsite in any worse condition. Always leave it in better condition than you found it. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Serena Lynn, who serves as Corporate Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Cargill. Serena leads a group of professionals providing global strategy and acquisition support throughout Cargill. She's a member of the Corporate Center and is executive sponsor of Cargill's Women's Network. Prior to joining Cargill, Serena worked at McKinsey & Company in New York, as well as Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati. She serves on the boards of directors of the Greater Twin Cities United Way, Children's Theater Company, and Perspectives Incorporated. Serena?
Thank you, Dale. Well, first of all, thank you for coming, and thank you for our sponsors for offering this opportunity for us to be here. I came to the Twin Cities about 3 years ago, and I have to be very honest, I did not know where Minneapolis was when Cargill called me, right? So the only knowledge I have of Minneapolis was this is a snowy city, and it's proven to be the case, right? So I came 3 years ago, really out of the lure of coming here to be part of a great organization called Cargill. And I have to recount this for you so that you see sort of why I decided to take the job and leave the comfort of McKinsey. My very first interviewer was Greg Page, our current chairman. He came down to the lobby of the Cargill's fantastic lake office. I don't know how many of you have been to Cargill Lake office. And he came down and actually met me in person. He came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Greg." I said, "Wow." And Greg is very tall, right? So I said, "Wow, I've met many CEOs in my career at McKinsey. I've never met a CEO who is so humble and so personable." So we walked up to his office on the second floor. I looked outside. This was 3 years ago, and the snow was right out the window on the second floor. So he saw me looking at the snow. He said, "So Serena, do you like snow?" And I was thinking, so what went through my head at the time was, I grew up in Taiwan, which is a tropical island. I went to high school in Hawaii, which is another tropical island. So I kind of looked at it and I said, gee, should I be honest with him? But we end up having a fantastic dialogue about the values of Cargill, about his leadership style, and what he expects of me, which I'll come to in a minute. That really set the tone. I joke about it. I said it's probably because I have very low expectations of what Cargill is all about. But after the day of interviewing, I walked away extremely excited about Cargill, about the Twin Cities. So I moved a family from New York and landed in Minneapolis 3 years ago. So what do I do? Strategy and business development, as Dale said. I'm very fortunate to lead an organization of highly, highly talented professionals that do strategy work for any of the 67 business units in Cargill, okay? As well as corporate strategy for the corporation. So in some ways, we act as counselors to our business leaders, we act as doctors to our business leaders, and frankly, sometimes as parents to our business leaders, right? So that's the strategy side. What we also do is we help guide mergers and acquisitions for Cargill. So Cargill, being a global company we buy and sell businesses all the time. So in order to make sure that we manage risk correctly, we have a group of people who are very, very talented in doing this, guiding the business through in understanding how to do due diligence, how to do valuations, how to do negotiation, and most critically, as Jean pointed out, how do you actually do integration once you have bought or sold the business? So that's what my group does. And what I do day to day, really interesting, sometimes it feels like babysitting, right? Because oftentimes, as a internal consultant, my job is to be able to hold the mirror and hold the truth in front of our business leaders and say, no, I don't think that business is actually right for you to buy because it doesn't quite fit your strategy, and let me explain to you why. Or make sure that you don't fall into the trap of groupthink and thinking that that's the right thing to do, and let me explain to you why, right? And I think throughout this, it gave me lots of growth and learning opportunities, especially my understanding of Cargill. And one of the things that Dale asked us to talk about also is what are the things that Cargill as an organization have done to further woman leadership. And I thought I'd hold myself up as case study number A, yeah? And because when Cargill hired me, my very first week on the job, I had a very senior leader who sat down with me as part of the onboarding lunch and said, Serena, did you realize that you came in and you're not just a minority, but you are a 5-time minority? I said, okay, let's count. So number one, I am woman. I said, yeah, I can't change that. Yeah, that's right. Number two, I'm Asian, okay? And of the corporate center of Cargill, which is the top 30 or so executives, there's no other Asian. And there are 2 other women. So I'm Asian, I'm a woman. Yeah, okay, that's the other thing I can't change. I do not have an agricultural background. I said, that's right, I couldn't tell corn from wheat, frankly. But I've learned it since, okay, just to be sure. But when I first signed up with Cargill, I never really set foot in the farm. I was always a city person, growing up in Taipei and Hawaii and New York and Boston. So I said, yeah, I don't know much about agriculture. I'm not from the Midwest, so I don't know what Minnesota nice means. I said, that's true. I've also since learned what that means, and we can compare notes whether we all agree with that or not. And lastly, I'm probably about a dozen years younger than my colleagues. Center, okay? Now, it's really interesting because this executive has since retired. And I could never figure out why he deliberately pointed those things out to me. Was it a way to scare me or was it a way to encourage me? But one thing I do know, the fact that Cargill actually hired me, to me at least, is that they're taking a risk on me, just like I'm taking a risk on them, and I'm taking a risk on Minneapolis. And to me, this is at least I feel that this could be a role model or an example for a company as long as Cargill. By the way, Cargill was celebrating 150 years of Cargill next year. To say, yeah, times have changed. We actually need to take some risk on leadership. We need to take some risk on people who did not grow up here, who did not have agricultural background, who, again, couldn't tell wheat from corn, and who look different from most of the people you find in Cargill. Right? So to me, this is a risk-taking which I'm sure we'll come back and touch on, because I think that's the other aspect of who we are as leaders in the corporate world. Dale also asked us to touch on challenges, and I love Karen's jungle gin example. So my story of challenge is that story of an American immigrant. Right? So I grew up in Taiwan. My dad is one of 8 who is the only child who went to college. My grandmother had to slaughter a pig in the beginning of every school semester just so that he has tuition to register. My dad, I think, since he was very young, realized that the only way for the family to have a future is to get out of the island. So when we were 13 years old, my mom took the kids and migrated to Hawaii, while my dad stayed in Taiwan and continued to work. Right? So parents lived apart for about 10 years. And as a kid, you took a lot of things for granted. I took a lot of things for granted, thinking, okay, Hawaii is a nice place. Yeah, it's great. Too bad that dad can't be here all the time and enjoy it, but we'll make the best out of it, right? You never realize the sacrifice that the parents actually had to make for us. But all joking aside, I think what that really taught me, and I'm to this day continue to be grateful, is the kind of work ethics and perseverance that my parents actually instilled in us. Right? So we moved to Hawaii when I was 13, didn't speak a word of English the first year. I cried every day for the first month and said, why don't we just go back to Taiwan? Why are we here? So spent 5 years in Hawaii and went to Harvard for undergrad, and subsequently went to Yale and McKinsey and landed here in Cargill. So to me, what's really interesting, especially during my career as a consultant at McKinsey, is I realized the challenge of the kind of upbringing I had. While I'm absolutely grateful for the Chinese upbringing that my parents has instilled in us, the Asian way of doing things, if you will, respect seniority. Do not speak until you've been asked to. Know what you're talking about. Especially as a woman, please stay behind. Those are the things that I actually had to challenge myself very hard, because I realized if I keep the kind of cultural norms that I had, I will never get anywhere in this world. Right? And I have to say, to this day, I continue to struggle. Because the challenge is, how do I keep the value and the tradition that is dear to me, but at the same time, be successful as I defined it, right, in the corporate world. So I see Dale is pointing at his watch, so I think that means I better pass it on.
Our fourth panelist is Carrie Ream, who is president and CEO of Ream Kenworth. Carrie began her career as a conference coordinator for the Pacific Telecommunication Council, and in 1994 left her first career to be a stay-at-home mom. After her husband's death in 2010, Carrie became owner of a third-generation truck dealership, Ream Kenworth. Under her leadership, her distributor has added 1 location, increased headcount by 33%, and has been certified by Women's Business Enterprise Network Council. Carrie is only one of only 2 100% women-owned Kenworth dealers in the United States. I think you've also continued to win numerous awards for how well your dealership is performing as one of the top dealerships in the country. So with that, Carrie.
Well, good afternoon, and I have to say that listening to these women's stories, I am in awe because, as Dale said, I took quite a lengthy early retirement and chose to raise our family and support my husband in his efforts to grow and maintain our family business. And as you heard earlier, I'm only one of 2 female Kenworth truck dealers that have 100% ownership. There are a few other dealerships that have partial woman ownership, but to be one of 2, and the other one is in New Jersey, so we don't get to network very often. It's a little bit overwhelming. Truck world is certainly dominated by men in dealership roles, truck and engine factories, engineering and sales roles, technicians, parts sales, body shop, drivers, trucking company owners, mostly men, but not all. There are women, and many in leadership and managerial roles, who have found their careers in the industry, but very few. And we heard earlier about C.H. Robinson's tremendous census of women. And they're a very large logistics company that use trucking companies to move freight across the United States. And I had recently connected with their CEO on LinkedIn and was amazed that there was a woman in that role. Talking about having a leadership role in a male-dominated industry, I guess I have to say a couple of things. First of all, I knew going in that I was not operating a daycare. But for me, kind of all started in kindergarten. I was pretty short for my age, and I'm still pretty short for my age. My mother was worried that the bigger boys would pick on me. So when she consulted my teacher, dear Mrs. Groutman, she said, "Don't worry about Carrie. I watched the other day as a boy tried to cut ahead of line in front of her in line for the slide during recess. She kicked him right in the shins." Well, today that might get me suspended or expelled. But that was a pretty early indication that I knew I had every right to be in line and to be next in line. And maybe the only qualification to be next in line at that point was that I'd waited. When I was in about 6th grade, the principal of my school announced that the orchestra needed more musicians. And I was so excited to run home that night and tell my parents that I, short Carrie, was going to take up the string bass. It was a challenge, but I love a big challenge. So then later on, as I was growing up, this was during the winter of my sophomore year in college, and it was pretty cold that winter. I decided it was a big world out there, and staying in Minnesota wasn't going to allow me to see it and experience it. So I applied to the University of Hawaii because I not only was looking for a warm place to live, but because I have a spirit of adventure and no fear of doing something other people would never dream of or have the nerve to do. I just did it, and off I flew. And I lived there for about 7 years, and that's after my grad school and through my thesis program is how I got involved with the Pacific Telecommunications Council. Now these and other life experiences prepared me for this corporate leadership role in several ways. Let me be clear, and as Dale mentioned, I did not pursue this career. This is not something I had planned for. It's probably never came on my radar. And why would it? It came to me unexpectedly after my husband, who had owned Ream Kenworth before I did, was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he died 4 months later. And during that time, we did not discuss what's going to happen with Kenworth. But he oftentimes told people in the course of our marriage, it's really good to have a smart wife. So I think in his own way, he didn't say, "Oh, Carrie, be sure to sell the business because you're never going to be able to run it." He let me make the decision. So now I found myself owning a business that others, men, were waiting in the wings to buy. I got phone calls, and they were sincere condolences, but also feelers. What's she gonna do? They probably thought that they could get it at a rock-bottom price from a stay-at-home mom with no dealership development experience and no interest in a dirty business. Well, they were wrong. First of all, I would never have sold something that I didn't understand the value of and what it really could be for our family and continue to be for our family. So although I legally owned our business, I had to go through a grueling extensive application process with Kenworth Truck Company to retain the franchise. I wound up in a boardroom with 3 of our senior managers, a 4-hour PowerPoint presentation, and a room full of men. There was 1 woman in there who were listening to what I had to say about how I would run this dealership. And it was pretty frightening because the day before we rehearsed, and we were told, you can take your jacket off. Well, first of all, they told me what to wear. A dark suit. They told me we could take our jackets off if the chairman took off his jacket. And we could sit down when they sat down. I mean, it was really, really starched. Not fun. Okay. So I had to convince them that I could do it. And so I just took all my experience for the last 17 years of my retirement, and I had been a Girl Scout leader, and I told them so, and I brought goodie bags. They all got a foil-wrapped heart, and I said, I just love being a Kenworth dealer. And I gave them, we have tubes of chapstick that are branded with our logo. And I said, we're going to need chapstick because there's going to be a lot of talking going back and forth, and you want to make sure you... And I said, and a fingernail brush, because I'm prepared to roll up my sleeves and get to work. Aww. Get my hands dirty. And they granted me the franchise. They gave me a 3-year contract. Men with very large Kenworth dealerships were dumbfounded that they were actually giving me this 3-year contract, because most of the time people get 2, and if they're not doing well, they get 1. So that was really a huge victory for me and for our company. My role as a dealer principal, I am the person who's responsible to meet the requirements of our manufacturer, and to make strategic business decisions for our own dealership. And I get to learn something new every day, because I didn't know how to do this 4 years ago. I'm leading a team of seasoned professionals. I'm very fortunate that my husband had gathered a really strong core to manage his business along with him. But we're moving in a different direction than what my husband had planned. And translating my vision for growth and expansion into action is how I spend most of my time. Trust me, I spend a lot of time rehearsing before I introduce a fresh idea or ask someone to do something they've never done before, and I believe is going to propel us forward. I have to rehearse because I have to make it believable. I can believe something, but I have to turn it into words and actions that people will see I'm serious. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because I have this huge deficit of information. I don't know how to do what I'm doing, but somehow I'm able to. And because I'm new in the industry, there is a real measure of insecurity behind everything that I do. So that pressure to be believable is very strong, and I would give that to you as a message. Whatever you're doing, you need to be believable. And I think you become believable if you do something that I'm committed to doing, which is, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Even if it doesn't work out the first time, I try again, and I continue to try. I also have a very good...
we have to...
Wrap it up?
Yeah,
okay.
thanks.
I'll wrap it up then. To wrap things up, working in a male-dominated truck industry is a challenge, but one I knew I could take on, because I knew I had the right to be in line, and I wouldn't stand for being shoved aside. I was not intimidated by a big challenge, and I have a fearless spirit.
I guess when it comes to having a healthy balance between work and family life and feeling like you're professionally successful and personally happy, what do you say to those who say that's just not doable?
Well, I would say that I've just never viewed it as a choice because I found support both from an organizational environment and from a home environment. So I think that's pretty critical. But I do think it's a very personal, situation, and everybody's is going to be different. But in many cases, I've found that over the course of time in my career, I never viewed this need to find, balance in one way or other. We all use that word balance. I've never found that to ever make sense for me. It's all about just doing what you need to do to get it done. And in many cases, what I found over the course of my career was it was more empowering than not to find that I could do both as long as I was in a world where I felt support on both sides.
Anybody else?
I think it's a myth that you can have it all the time at the same time. I think that ducks are very effective at having it all. They appear to be having it all. I like to watch ducks right now, and they're really, really busy underneath the water, and they're simply as tranquil as can be. Women are particularly effective at being good ducks. But I don't think that there are too many people who would say, I actually do have it all, and the only story I can remember now was when my now 24-year-old daughter showed up for the closing ceremony in kindergarten, and another mother made the observation, not particularly helpfully, that this was a dress-up event and that Lauren was not properly attired for the event. She had cute purple shorts on. The good news is she was at a school where uniforms were required, and they had the used uniform sale going on in the gym. So I made a mad dash, and I got her first upper school uniform so she could at least have a dress on for the closing ceremonies. You cannot have it all of the time.
I'll offer slightly different. First of all, define what does having it all mean. Is it this big, or is it this big? Right? I think I'm pretty happy with what I have right now. My have it all is pretty small. I have 3 criteria. Number 1 is I have a happy family that I can look back at my parents and say I'm very happy and grateful they're healthy, and I have a happy family with my husband and my daughter. Number 2, I know that my daughter is taken good care of mainly by my husband. And number 3, I have a fulfilling professional career. That's my having it all. What does it mean? So what do I not have? No, I do not volunteer at my daughter's school plays. No, I do not go to bake sales. No, I do not take her to swim meets. And yes, from time to time, I have to miss some of the stuff that's happening with her after school extracurricular activities. And no, I don't have a lot of hobbies, right? But that's okay, because my definition of having it all is fairly small. Right? And I think that's some of the things that we talked about the other night when we got together is the having it all, the pie changes during the different stages in your life. And you have to define what it's in the pie and what's out of the pie. And what's out of the pie, let it go, because you can. You can't possibly juggle all of that. Guess what? If you juggle all of that, all the balls are going to drop, and you're going to have nothing. So.
As a business owner, you almost never get to turn it off. There's a lot going on. So in terms of having it all, I've got it all coming at me all the time. And if there's one thing that I wish I had, and I just don't have time to interview people, I really wish I could find a new cleaning person. So I don't mean to make light of it, but I think they covered it very well. They just reminded me that I need to try to get a hold of somebody.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody. I guess, when you think about it being kind of personalized and that it does change with time, is there one trait, practice, or way of being where it could help other women ascend the corporate ladder regardless of how they perceive success and where they're at in their careers? What one trait or behavior might that be?
Well, I guess I would answer that as being an interested learner. Someone who's curious and is interested in learning, I think, brings a lot of energy, a lot of passion to what they're doing. I think it has great impact on people in the organization. And I also think it just leaves you open to possibilities. And I think it's been written about so many times, but I think a really great leader is someone who sees themselves as a continuous learner. And so I think if you approach life that way, the possibilities are endless. And I think, truly, I think it's a trait that is noticed and valued, and advancement becomes a part of that.
I agree completely, because what that does is give you an informed perspective. Too many women make the mistake of being wishy-washy when it comes time to actually take a stand or have a position. To have an informed perspective, because you have curiosity and you have learned something new, can give you a seat at the table more quickly than perhaps even other accomplishments in your life.
We did not rehearse this, but I think we all have similar advice. Mine would be learn to deconstruct yourself and then reconstruct. What I've learned, by the way, the analogy here is, you know how they always say stock market past performance does not indicate future profit? It's the same thing with your skill sets. In fact, what I've learned during my career, especially McKinsey, is what I've learned in the past and what I've done really well in the past actually become hindrance for me to move forward, right? As a student, I was very good at checking boxes and doing analysis. Guess what? That doesn't help me once I become a project team leader. Once I become a project team leader, making sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed across my team does not help me become a better leader. But we only have so much capacity in terms of what we really hold in our brain at any given time. So what do you need to do? You actually have to say, I'm going to very consciously give away some of those skills. I will not micromanage. I will not check all the spreadsheets to ensure their accuracy, because I have other skills to learn. I need to learn new things. I need to deconstruct myself and then reconstruct.
I think others have covered this very well. One trait I think that we need to entertain or remind ourselves of is that we can't take ourselves too seriously. And no matter what we're doing, it has to be fun. It can't be a drudge. So those are the only two things I can think of to add, because if it isn't fun, why are you doing it?
Completely agree.
I want to open it up to questions from the audience. If anybody has a question out there, just hold your hand up and we can bring a microphone over to you.
Is it on?
Yes.
I'm with Dunwoody College, and we only have about 12% of our student body that are female. And one of the issues that we're facing is not only recruiting women into the technical fields and into school, but retention. So what do you think are some of the key elements to retention? Because it's not just getting into the C-suite or into the board, but how do you keep the good women there?
Who would like that one first?
I'll try that one. Are you talking about within a program, within industry, in any of the above?
All of the above. Retention is a big deal. It's not just recruiting, but it's retention.
Yeah, I think it's find a way to see themselves in other organizations so that they understand how their skills will interact with others. It's very hard if you look into a mirror and there really is no reflection. And I think one of the important elements is, and it's a little harder for women, particularly in the fields that you would be supporting at Dunwoody, to see themselves in those roles. I don't know how many of you have traveled with a male companion and sat on a plane only to see a female pilot and you hear gasps around you. It still happens, and the gasps are not coming necessarily only from men, but there is a perception that for some reason a woman is too delicate to fly a plane. I don't know that the guy is much bigger. But the point I'm making is that we have to create opportunities for people who are emerging in areas where they have not been known to be heavily populated with women to see themselves in it. And it may only be one, but one is better than none.
But perhaps let me extrapolate it to the corporate environment. I think for most of the corporations, we face exactly the same problem. I have many Cargill colleagues here, and I think Cargill folks would agree that we have no problem attracting top talent. Right? So if you look at entry-level statistics, it's about 50-50, male, female. But just like most other corporations out there, as people progress in their careers, somehow the drop-off of women start to be very significant. Right? So you see this pipe, really big fat pipe coming in, and then at the very senior level, it drops down to, Rebecca, Joanne, 15%, 16%, I think. I did pay attention, you see? So, and that seemed to be a trend, right? So somehow it's not about attraction. It's about retention. It's about advancement. It's about opportunities. Now, without going into a whole lot of detail, I mean, so I put my consulting hat on and I said, why is that the case? I think the factors are obviously very complicated. There's no one single answer. But I put it into sort of 3 buckets. One is structurally, are you structurally designed in such a way that encourage women to advance? Simple things. Are your work hours aligned with, daycare hours? By the way, it's not just a woman issue. Somebody has to do it, either male or female, right? So, last year we have all these snow days. Who's going to take care of my daughter at home? Right? So structurally, are you structured hardware-wise, right, to have to do those flexible work arrangements? We talked a lot about those, right? Ramp down, ramp up for women, right? So structurally, are you structured well to be able to encourage women to stay and wanting to come back to work? But that's, in some ways, the easier part. The harder part, and I'll say again, Cargill is on that journey. We're not quite where we need to be, is how do you change the mindset and the behavior and the culture of an organization that says, we are here to encourage everybody to be successful. We're not talking about men, we're not talking about women, we're talking about everybody who wants to be here and be successful. The mindset shift is very challenging. Just imagine, only 2 years ago, there's no uniform company out there that manufactures female uniforms for people who work in plants. Cargill has 1,200 plants worldwide. So you wonder, how do our female engineers, what do they wear when they go to work? Right? But it's a mindset, because if people don't actually raise those kind of issues, and by the way, unfortunately, the people who need to raise those issues are not women, it's men, because these are the people who are in the leadership position who can call that a problem. And I wish we can see more men in this room, and thank you for those men who are here, brave enough to be surrounded by women. But I wish there's more men here to actually say, yeah, I'm here to champion. Because to change the culture and the mindset of organization, it has to start at the top. And if that's where most of the male are, that's where we need to start.
I think, Serena, you absolutely said this, but I as an organization that knows that women leadership is so critical to who we are, and as a relationship-type business, it is something that I spend more time thinking about than just about any other issue. We have to show paths of opportunity within our own organizations for that retention. And so I think it's a very intentional thought. It's a very intentional discussion. You still need the right people, as I said earlier, the right people in the right jobs to do the work that needs to be done. But to create some volume with women in an organization, I think does and eventually get you past some obstacles that might be there just because of the lack of. And so to create more volume in and of itself, I think gets rid of some of those obstacles, but it's still got to be the right people, because if you don't have the right people in the right jobs, it adds fuel to the fire, and it creates more of those naysayers than not. So it's hiring right, it's being thoughtful, it's being intentional, but it's also then supporting that success and showing future opportunity as well to maintain those folks as part of the organization.
Did anyone happen to see the story on WCCO television last night about the trend of women opting out? Did anybody else watch that?
Yeah.
I thought it was really interesting because there was a wide variety of reasons that people were doing that. I think as a business owner, or as anyone who has hiring responsibility, one thing that we can do is understand why people have gaps in their employment, and also to understand why some people need flexibility. We run 3 shifts at our St. Paul location, and we have some men who like to work second or third shift because it works out for their own family's daycare. I hired a woman to be our HR manager, and up front she said, I need the flexibility to go be room mother from time to time, to work from home 1 day a week, to do these variety of things. And I said, sure, I don't have a problem with that. If somebody else here wonders why you're not here at 8, leaving at 4:30, well, they've got a bigger problem. Because I might expect them to stay till 4:35 someday, and they better be willing. But also, we have a young woman who works in our warranty department who started her career as a car technician. She wanted to be a truck technician, but she's pretty petite, and she was convinced early on that some of the parts were going to be too heavy for her to hold on to. But she has this very big interest in trucks and how they run and parts and so on and so forth. And we've given her the flexibility to work a different, other than a day shift, so that she can homeschool her son as well. So I think as women, we're in a role where we get being pulled towards some of those other responsibilities, and how do you deal with it? How do you juggle with it? And so I would encourage you to retain women by allowing them that flexibility.
We are unfortunately just about out of time. So I want to just mention one more time that there are sheets out there. If you want to be part of the dialogue going forward, please take a look at the subjects, put the number of the subject you'd like to partake in on the back of your business card and leave it in one of the baskets. Also, we had some other questions that we didn't have a chance to get to. So if you'd like to see if we might be able to address some of those questions offline, if you want to just write questions on the back of your business card and leave that in the basket too, we'll see if we can also get some answers to some of these remaining questions. I just wanted to also once again thank St. Kate's for being our partner today, and also Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable. Thank you to both organizations. I also want to thank once again our sponsors. Without your help, we could not be doing this event, so thank you very much for that. And also, please join me in once again thanking our excellent panel today.